Welcome to Glutened, the podcast where we amplify the voices of those living with celiac disease and allergies or intolerances. Each episode offers a unique perspective and invaluable insight into life with celiac disease. I'm your host, Maisa, and together let's share stories, foster understanding, and build a supportive community. Hi, Claire. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you. Really good, thank you.
Good. Claire, I know that you are celiac as well, and you've been diagnosed as celiac in 2017, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, that's right. Yes, January 17.
Would you like to tell us a bit more about your diagnosis and just a little bit more about you, please?
Yeah, of course. So I was diagnosed in January 2017.
Mhm.
Thankfully, after quite a short period of time, um, I fell quite ill with what I thought was a stomach bug,
Okay.
and just never got better. I went back to the doctors multiple times, A&E a couple of times, and every time I went, the GP said to me that I was suffering with IBS.
Okay.
Uh, yeah, suffering with IBS, and that possibly I was depressed.
Okay.
Um, yeah, and I think one GP actually suggested, it was around Christmas time, and one GP actually suggested that I put on some nice fluffy pajamas, put on a nice Christmas movie, and ate all my favourite foods, and I might feel a bit better.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think that followed by several trips to A&E, with the normal symptoms that that we get. And eventually I begged the GP for a blood test. And the reason I asked for the blood test was my dad has celiac
Oh,
disease as well.
okay.
So the symptoms were very similar to what he experienced in the past. And I basically said to them, look, my dad has it. I
Yeah.
know that it can run in the family. And eventually, after about 6 months, they did a blood test for me, and then followed it up, obviously, with the endoscopy and stuff as well. So yeah,
Okay.
so thankfully, I know some people go through quite a journey to get that
Yeah.
that diagnosis, and yeah, I was quite lucky to have still a long, quite a long time, 6 months, but certainly shorter than what some people experience. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very lucky. And have you been prescribed antidepressants or anything like that?
No,
No.
and that wasn't the I they often offered them to me, and I
Okay.
declined because I was aware that it was my stomach that was that,
Okay.
there was
Yeah.
something was going on. So no, I never had any medication as
Okay.
such. No.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm aware that you are a volunteer in a food bank. I'm not sure which food bank exactly, but you shared one of my posts, and I'm very grateful. Thank you very much.
No, you're
So,
welcome.
would you
Yeah.
like to tell us a bit more about that? Uh,
Yeah, certainly. So I have a good friend who runs a food bank, Slough Food Bank in Berkshire.
okay.
And she, as I said, she runs the food bank, and every year they do, well, several times throughout the year, they do what they call like a big collection. So they Tesco's allow them to go into, and this happens up and down the country. Tesco's allow them to go in for particular weekends throughout the year. Normally it's one at Christmas. I think there's one around the summer and one around now actually in Easter. And you basically collect for the food bank. And as people are obviously doing their food shop, you hand out a little shopping list of the items that are really, essential. And you hope that when they come back through the tills at the other end,
Yeah.
they've perhaps purchased or they donate a couple of items. So yeah, I help out with the big collection for my friend's food bank.
Nice.
Um, yeah.
Okay. I'd like to know a bit more. Like, you are volunteering there, but what do you see day to day? What are your biggest challenges? What do people need the most, especially when we're talking about allergies and, let's say, celiac disease and
No, of course. And I think one of the reasons I was particularly interested was having celiac disease and knowing that a gluten-free diet is the only way to control that.
yeah.
When I was speaking with my friend who runs the food bank, one of my questions was, do people come in food allergies, and I'm assuming they do, but how do they manage that? And the biggest question for me really was, with the cost of gluten-free food being, ridiculously high compared to normal food, how is that managed? And do people donate? Do they have a gluten-free section and that type of thing? So it was really insightful actually to kind of get an idea of how the food banks manage people with dietary requirements. And I think one of the things that I learned and found really interesting was that they not only give these food parcels out, but they also offer them extra support. So they offer things like cooking lessons and nice. Things like that, which actually, again, when I was chatting with my friend, there's many products out there that are actually naturally gluten-free. You don't have to buy the one that's labeled gluten-free all over it. And so, she took away from that as well, that actually they can tell people, when you are doing your shopping, or there are items in these food parcels that don't have gluten-free necessarily written all over them, but they are naturally gluten-free. Yeah. So yeah, it's been really interesting just finding out how they manage from a dietary requirement side. Yeah.
And is there a lot of people that require gluten-free or an specific allergy?
Yeah, and I think there are, and sadly I think it's possibly one of the things that people almost let go in order just to get the food parcel, and I think as people with celiac disease will know that how important it is to follow that strict diet for various reasons. And it's really quite sad to think that somebody would perhaps not ignore it, but choose to perhaps not follow that just simply to get food of some sort. And the statistics for food banks in general is really quite alarming. It's quite sad, really. Yeah,
it is. Yeah. Another question I was gonna say: do you get bread on prescription, gluten-free food or flour or?
Yeah, I used to. When I was first diagnosed, I was. But if I'm honest, I'm not a huge bread eater anyway. I never was. But initially I got I got the free prescription boxes that you can get, which are great if anyone hasn't had those. They're great to try the products. And then I stopped the prescription. Having said that, my dad still gets the prescription, so I quite often will pinch one of his loaves if I do want one. But no, me personally, I don't get the prescription anymore. But again, that's a topic that is again really quite frustrating. Depending on where you live, depending on your postcode, depending on the doctors you fall into, depends on whether you can get that prescription or not. And again, it's sad that people can't get those staple items that they perhaps, need help with, just based on the area.
It's very, very unfair. And some people are really in need, and I just don't understand why they can't help. Why?
It's a huge frustration. I think, you either give it to everybody, or not. I don't want to say not, because I believe that everyone should have access to that, regardless of where you live. Yeah.
And in your opinion, what can we, as a normal human being or person or whatever, when I'm in Tesco's, what can I do to help as much as I can?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is, with the food banks, is that they're not asking you to donate every time. And I think, it's just adding that one extra item. And interestingly, it's not always food. So again, my friend was telling me that quite often people let things go in order to have food, things like toothpaste, shower gel, deodorant, toilet roll, those sort of things, which a lot of us maybe take for granted, but actually people let that go in order to eat instead. And so quite often, things like a tube of toothpaste, or for ladies, some sanitary products, etc., that will cost you under £1, not every week, not every shop, but just that one item every now and then could really make a difference. And as I said, I tend to do the big collection at Christmas.
Yeah.
And, that's where we get a few more of the treats. So people donate things like selection boxes and things like that for the children. Perhaps they're going to have nothing else at all. But yeah, I would just encourage people that, it's not something you have to give to all the time, but just, if you've got to buy one, get one free, maybe just think every now and then to give the free. Or, things like that can really make a difference to someone.
Yeah, especially if it's a family with the kid that has celiac or daily intolerance or anything like that, right?
Yeah, and quite often as well, it'd be a good idea to, and again, a lovely thing I saw online where you do almost like a reverse advent calendar at Christmas.
Okay.
So you would put 24 items into a bag. And again, like I said earlier, they don't have to be gluten-free items, from the big names that do charge us, sadly, a fortune. They could be 24 naturally gluten-free items that you can still pick up, relatively cheap. So yeah, I think there's many ways people could donate. And of course, there's always giving your time as well,
Oh yeah. Okay. So you're saying that people can volunteer.
100%. Yeah. I think the food banks are always calling out for people to, again, doesn't have to be on a regular basis. It doesn't have to be a regular commitment.
It
could just be going in, and helping out in the warehouse or helping out at one of these collection events, or, setting up a collection within your company you work in, or, my local yoga class that I go to has a box outside.
That's lovely.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think small businesses, I'll talk about myself. 10% of whatever we make goes to a food bank or whoever needs it.
Yeah.
If almost every business, I'm not going to talk about the government, this is none of my business. I don't want to go there. But if we can do it as individuals, then nobody will need, or nobody will suffer, nobody will need the help anymore. We'll all be helping each other, and automatically everyone will be eating and everyone will stop suffering and everyone will probably be healthy.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, not a lot of people think the same way, but I'd love to encourage people to try and help as much as possible. I know on Instagram we're all lovely, we're all trying to help each other, but there's some people that are not on Instagram and don't know what's going on. Right?
Yeah.
And they're trying to go by day to day and they're really struggling. So I wanted to speak to you about your experience in the food bank because of what's going on at the moment, because as well I saw on Instagram there's a post that a lot of families are struggling.
Indeed. Yeah.
And if we can help, please let's help as much as we can. That's all I can say.
I agree. And I think one of the really other interesting things I learned was about the people that use food banks.
Okay.
And I think sometimes there's perhaps a little bit of a stigma around who they might be, their background, what they do. And actually, I've learned so much about, anyone at any time, their circumstances can change overnight. And they could find themselves using, and I met at the last collection I did, I met a lovely lady who came up to me with a huge bag of Tesco's. She'd done her shop and she bought a separate bag for the food bank. And she said a couple of years ago, she found herself in a situation and she had to go and use the food bank. And she was, back on her feet and everything else. But in that moment, she had to use it. And so I think sometimes as well, it's just having a better understanding of who might have to, because we never know who might
some people live a paycheck to a paycheck, and then all of a sudden something happens, you just don't know, and then you can't get help, you can't get, I don't know what you call it, benefits. Nobody will help you, and then you have to go to the food bank and get some food, I'm afraid. It's really sad.
One of the other biggest things I think for me was in fact, just before I joined you, I just wanted to write down a couple of things from the website, just really so I remembered them. But one of the biggest things, the Trussell Trust, obviously, who run the food banks up and down the country, one of the statistics they put on their website for 2023 was 1 million food parcels were given last year for children, just children.
Wow.
So there was 2,900,000 parcels given out in total, but 1 million of those were for children.
For kids.
And that's heartbreaking. Yeah.
It is. Yeah, it's unfair.
Yeah, really unfair.
Yeah.
And then I think add in a dietary requirement on top of that, and it just makes it really difficult. Yeah, really difficult and worrying.
It is very worrying and difficult. Well, Claire, this is it from my side. If you'd like to add anything, please go ahead.
No, I just think, as we both said, if people can help in any way, no matter how small, you might think that tube of toothpaste or that packet of rice or
exactly.
That jar of pasta sauce, as long as they're all gluten-free. It really can make a difference to people. Really can. Yeah.
I'll put the details about the food bank that you volunteer at as well.
Oh, thank you.
No problem at all. Thank you so much for coming.
Absolute pleasure. Absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
No problem.